So good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarjo, and this is Monday Live, something we do at 3 o'clock in the afternoon every Monday. We're here to discuss smart buildings and the advancement of technologies and stuff related to it. Panelist profiles are on mondaylive.org if you want to see links to our LinkedIn profiles. Just as a reminder, views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. And please do post your questions and comments on the Zoom link. If you could take the survey at the end, it would be great. This slide deck that I'm showing is on mondaylive.org as well. We'll be having some links in there if you want to get any of those links. Just head over there and you'll actually see this very slide deck. Just as a reminder, our theme for January of 2021 is the future of workforce for smart buildings, and today we'll be talking about that as our main subject. And so in terms of our agenda, we'll have a general chit chat about what's going on, news and trends, and then we'll talk about education and training. We have a couple of guests, hopefully, that will be joining us, and then we'll just have a chit chat. So before that, I'm going to share some slides that the members have put together. First one is from me. You may have seen the Fortnite game developer, I've forgotten the name of the company now, is
Epic.
There you go, Epic Games is buying a shopping mall and converting it to an HQ. It's something that we talked about in the reuse or the repurposing some time ago. Interesting article in the New York Times about the flexibility and the dynamics of office space. That's kind of interesting. John Petsy talking about, not quite sure what we'll
Two topics. Everything on the left goes with the URL at the top right, which is interesting that office sales are starting to tick up as the distress fails to materialize. So that was pretty interesting, given a lot of our conversation. And then, we talked about good news from DC as far as what the Biden administration, how they were focusing on smart buildings. But here was something else about the Federal Reserve getting back involved in supporting investment in the area. You got to read the article. It's a little bit detailed, but it's positive for our overall industry.
Good. Nice to have some good news. Mark talking about job cuts in 2020 in entertainment, transport, and retail. And we're doing CES virtual this year, so we can all just sort of get all the stuff in real time, I guess. And talking about the Epic thing again. Ken will get Ken to talk about where he's going next with automated buildings. Roger talking about de-risking with insurance. I'm sure we'll talk about that. And Anno talking about technology leadership, which we'll cover as well. So with that, Ken, do you want to start? You want to kick off? Tell us what you're doing and how things are going in January and what your focus for February is.
Okay, I'll do that so Mark doesn't jump up and say you're on mute. So it's the most said words on Zoom. So we're on to our next thing, which we're looking at together apart. It's kind of this whole theme that has kind of evolved out of the last year, and we just had a chit chat with the folks at Control Trend on Saturday, and we kind of pushed that around and had some fun with it. I think it's part of our life, this whole idea that we're going to come together and we're going to all be remote. We're all going to be apart, and this yin yang. I think we got to get used to that. The other thing, so I've got this article, and it's going off to Connected Contractor. and it'll become our theme for February. In addition to that, I'm wanting to try and get back our our connection community collaboratory, which we normally do at AHR. Of course, we can't do it at AHR this year because there is no AHR Chicago. It's been moved to Las Vegas in 2022. So anyway, I'm suggesting that we maybe try and pull that together. Control Trend folks are willing to do that. So a lot of the folks are normally part of that, Mark and John Petsy and a few others here. So anyway, I'd like to kind of get that going as well. The other one I pointed out was the Shopify model. I think is interesting to watch because we're kind of looking at how can we change our industry. And this is a young company, a Canadian company that's been extremely successful. If you kind of look at their Wikipedia summary, it kind of shows how the evolution of the company. And there's some steps in there that I think are important for us, and that is the development of a network or a place where we can have APLs developed and also apps and stuff. We need like an app store, and we need this kind of start developing some of that as an industry. So I think there's some interesting stuff to just take a look at how rapidly that all developed and how significantly large it became. And I think there's stuff we can learn as an industry from that.
Great. Thank you, Ken. Roger, you want to talk about insurance and de-risking?
Yeah, I just thought it was an interesting slant on insurance companies working with people with AI, so end users who are using it and using it for predictive maintenance, right? You're saying, okay, at least you're looking into things before they break down so they can actually get a better deal with their insurance. So it's a good application for AI. We've talked about, what do you do with the data once you get it? There's a good application where, insurance companies are beginning to look at how they can use that information with the customer to help reduce their insurance bills.
Great, another area of value creation for us. Mark, so what of the 6 trends to watch at CES are you most excited about that's on your slide? You're muted.
Hey, Mark, you're muted, baby.
You're still muted.
I have no idea. I posted this because what's interesting is, I guess the question for this group is some of the trends that have been shared in the past at CES have made their way to our industry. I'm curious to see if some of the things that are talked about now this year will be, will enter our industry at some point in time. So that's kind of why I put that on there as a reminder to kind of take a look at, see what other industries are doing and see if and or how it applies. And I see that you and I had the same thing about the mall in North Carolina, which again, you already mentioned it, that we talked about repurposing existing structures and what avenue that's going to take. So this is I think this is a pretty good one. Obviously, it's a huge, enormous facility and so forth. So that was good. And then, we all talked about, as far as, one of the topics we'll talk to later about the education. And, we all have said over and over again how many opportunities there are within the industry, whether it's technical, service, development, so forth and so on. There's lots. And here, from these 3 industries, look at the pool of available people that are out there. In other words, again, how do we influence these people to take a look at this industry? So that's why I put that on there. And the numbers were staggering. I mean, as far as the percentage increases from 19 to 2020. So There you go.
Thank you, Mark. Maybe Anna, you can, because your what you posted is somewhat related about leadership challenge. Can you explain?
Yeah, that's actually it's a paper by, what's the name? Tigert and Struggle, the research guys. And they were doing they did the research on the gap of technology awareness in building owner operators. They were specifically focused on data analytics, digitization, and whether the building owners were ready, prepared for, or are in the midst of doing digitization of their systems, and what was the skill sets of their operators. And they were pointing out the gap and the need for training and education in that space, which I thought was relevant to our discussion today. Not only training and education for people on the supply side, but on the on the user side, demand side, the gap between knowledge and understanding of these new technologies coming at them. Interesting article if you get a chance to read it, download it. The link's in the thing. I think you need to join that site to get access.
Okay. Great, thank you. Any other sort of thoughts, general thoughts before we dive into training and education from anybody?
I just opened up the link that John sent out about the 6 trends, and loosely or not, 3 or 4 of them could directly or indirectly be related to this industry. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I agree. Saw the same thing.
Yeah. Okay, so let us move on to talking about training and education. We have 2 guests that I'm going to bring on to be a panelist. The first is James Dice, and the second is Phil Zito. So welcome, James and Phil. Good of you 2 guys to join us today. And so, as I mentioned earlier, our theme of January is about workforce generally. And for this week, we really want to talk about training and education. And maybe I'll start giving James a little bit of time, maybe a few minutes, to talk about what you're doing, because you're making a lot of noise in the industry in terms of trying to figure out what's the future of the industry. So explain how you're doing, and then we'll get on to Phil and then have a general discussion. James, welcome, and all yours.
Yeah, thanks, Anto. Thanks for having me. Can you guys all hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Cool. So that was a lot there. So how I'm doing is great. This is a great time to be in the industry. Been having a lot of fun lately, meeting a lot of new people, including a lot of you guys. So as far as education goes, I was kind of hoping Phil would go first, because he's more of the expert here, but I'll kind of give my 2 cents on kind of what I'm working on. So last summer, I had the idea to, I noticed that I was about 10 years into the industry, right? So joined the industry right out of college. I was doing energy management and commissioning, monitoring-based commissioning, working with a bunch of different types of technology, including analytics software and that type of thing. And I realized when I look back on my 10 years that the learning curve could have been a little easier, I guess, as far as my onboarding. I guess I felt like, looking back, I was part of the industry after those 10 years, but I felt like there was some things I could have done if I were to kind of mentor my young self to like shorten that learning curve a little bit. So I'll just keep it short, because I know that we got a long way to go. But what I did was ended up launching a course called Nexus Foundations, and it's built for anyone who's kind of in the position that I was. Not so much when you're straight out of college, but maybe 2-3 years out. Or you might be someone that's been in the industry for a long time, and you just need to understand all the changes that technology are driving, a lot of the stuff that you guys talk about on here every day. So we launched the first cohort in the fall, and we're gearing up for cohort 2. So we had 25 students in the first cohort. They were from all over the world. I'm not sure where they all came from. They were from all over the world, all different types of roles in the industry. It was really quite fascinating how it all came together. And then, yeah, so we launched cohort 2, delivered it. Great feedback, but also lots of suggestions for improvements because it was the first one that we did. And now we're getting ready for cohort 2. So hoping to get another 25 to around 50 people in the next cohort, and we'll kind of connect them all together again. So there's about 15 people that are already signed up, and again, it's from all over the world already. So I'll stop there and let you guys ask any questions. That's basically what I'm spending all my time on right now.
Can you comment on some of the key syllabus items that you address?
Yeah, so how I designed the curriculum was really based around all of the ways in which I've had projects get messed up in the past. So it's kind of, each week is kind of focused around different ways in which projects kind of go off track, I guess. So it starts off with identifying all the stakeholders. So as you guys know, building owners and organizations have a ton of different stakeholders on their projects. And so it's really not only teaching students about that big mess, I guess you could call it, but also teaching them how to talk to their coworkers if they're internal to the organization, or talk to their clients if they're external to the organization, so they can figure out all the different webs of people that are involved, so they can help move their projects forward. And then from there, it's focused on, okay, how do we improve those people's lives? So it's kind of applying the design process to building. So designing use cases. From there, then assessing existing buildings. So we get into the weeds on, if you have your use cases designed, what are all the ways in which the existing systems are going to get in the way of implementing those systems. So we talk about integration. We talk about assessing a building for how smart it is or how dumb it is. Then we get into going into the marketplace. So going shopping is a daunting task in our industry that I often talk about a lot on my blog. And so going into the marketplace, how do you assess different technologies? How do you talk to vendors? How do you hear their pitches? And then we get into the planning process. So how do you get a smart building program in place for your portfolio, and then into executing an actual project. So kind of taking it through the entire life cycle to getting from a bunch of dumb buildings into more of an ongoing program.
Any other questions before we move on to Phil? So Phil, thank you, James, and I'm sure we'll come back to all of those points. Phil, you've been with us before, so welcome back. Tell us what you're doing. Tell us what you're seeing in the market in terms of what's driving what types of education, and how you're doing.
Sure. So I'll talk about the market first, and then I'll talk about us. So as far as the market goes, we're seeing that folks are ebbing and flowing as far as training adoption based on where they're located. So certain areas, and just speaking of the United States, but this can also be contextualized globally, but certain areas in the United States, they executed a lot of their backlog last fall. Other parts are starting to open back up and execute their backlog now. So as far as training and development goes, we're seeing still an interest in skill assessments to identify gaps for their teams. And then we're also seeing a more role and task specific training approach. So people are looking at what potential projects are on our books, what are we looking to execute from a backlog perspective, and then how can we go and upskill people, kind of like a just-in-time training model. So that is something we're seeing quite a bit. And we're seeing, for example, on the West Coast where everything's locked down, we're seeing people invest in holistic training. So like a technician and everything that would be associated with a technician, versus down in the South where people are having backlog that has been open for a while. We're starting to see kind of the more just traditional approach whenever we get time. And then now on the East Coast where stuff is starting to open up a little bit, you're starting to see people say, oh, we've got this project coming up with this technology stack or this application. We're going to specifically train for this skill. So based on the geographies, you're seeing 3 different training approaches. As far as what we're up to, well, we've completed the different paths that we wanted to create based on roles. So we cover all the different roles that you would expect from traditional contractors and operators. And we are now starting to shift to a skill talent development approach. So we're starting to build out more of a school model where we're taking people who are maybe out of trade school, out of college, or out of high school, and putting them through a admissions process, putting them through a deferred training plan with a deferred payment, and then connecting them with our contractor and owner customers for placement services. So we're going to be rolling that out this year.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Phil. Thanks for that overview. So open it up to the group.
A quick question there, Phil. Do you actually get a certificate if you complete these Ranger courses? Those certified type training?
No, and we're probably not going to go down that path because of the legal ramifications associated with the term certified.
Okay.
I've went back and forth on that. The only certification that I'm aware of that exists outside of Niagara, which, I mean, if folks are looking to get hired today, I say go get your TCP. Doesn't matter where you get it from. That'll get you hired by 50% of the companies out there just having TCP. Outside of that, there is a certification in the UK that is pretty well respected, but they have a very apprenticeship, almost unionized model. So that works well there. Unless controls techs become unionized in the United States, I don't see how we would apply a centralized certificate model. I know Best and what's the guy's name with Best? The guy who runs Best, Level. I'm probably butchering his last name. He's trying to roll out a certificate. It'd be great if he comes out with one. Those things cost like $400,000 to $800,000 to just get into phase 1. I mean, I looked into it with ISO cert. It's crazy expensive.
Okay, yeah, because as you mentioned, in the UK, there's a there's a trade association that's run by the controls industry, both from the controls manufacturers and the SIs and anybody's associated with them. They run training courses throughout the year. There's about 6 or 7 of them, and you can get a certificate at the end of the day, which is useful. It's not a legal thing, but it actually says, hey, you know, you completed controls fundamental, HVAC, hydraulics, and things like this, all the basics. And it's actually created by the controls industry for anybody to attend. But you know, it's a nice way to at least cover all those fundamentals.
Yeah, we offer certificates of completion. Yeah. And we have a credentialing database, and people do add our organization as a school to their LinkedIn profiles. So we are seeing people valuing that. At least our contractor customers, when they see someone's been through our training, they value that because they know who we are. But this is a huge industry, so there's plenty of customers we don't serve.
Okay.
So I got a question for both Phil and James. Sorry. So in the traditional training world of technical vocational schools, as well as you know, universities, a number of them offer programs that are related to this industry. How do you contrast what you're doing to what's available out in that world? And do you view you as supplementing, replacing, better than? Please draw a comparison to them.
You want to go first, James?
No, not really.
Because you're pretty niched out there. I mean, there's very few compared to you. I think I'm the one who has the more competition from the trade school market.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I haven't seen, and I feel someone just sent me a link to a course from maybe somewhere else. So maybe there are courses that are like mine out there, but I haven't seen them. So mine is focused more on people that are kind of already in the industry and working to like understand industry specific, whereas the courses I've seen in academia are less industry specific, more either engineering based or more like Phil said, more trade school based. So I think that's the main distinction. The other piece is the cohort based model that I've chosen. So it's really, there's a piece of the course that I think is really important, which is connecting like-minded people. So the point of my course is to take, and we all know people that are kind of new to the industry, and they just, like John and I talked about this on the phone last week, that there's people that just don't quite get it. And then once you have the people that do get it, you really want that relationship to be maintained. So a part of the course that I've developed that is about bringing people from all over the world together. So we do live Zoom calls, we do breakout rooms, we do workshops. There's teams that they're each on a team that they can kind of do their assignments and learn together. And then there's a chat room that's kept up the entire 6 weeks, actually that's still up right now, that people are still talking to each other on. So there's this aspect of community that I'm hoping to build and maintain and kind of turn that into a snowball. Whereas I think a lot of the courses that I've seen kind of start and end, they're more finite.
You got any clarifying questions for James?
I was going to say, James or Phil, I mean, when you've run these classes and cohorts and stuff, what's the one thing that's jumped out at you that surprised you by the type of questions or feedback that are coming from the attendees?
I think I've been less surprised. So I think what I've been most surprised about is the even when you find yourself in my course. So I think the course it talks a lot about the different silos in our industry and how can we figure out how to break down the silos in our industry. And I think I've been surprised by even the people that made their way into the course are still kind of only coming at it from their own silo. So I think I was surprised to the degree in which the silos are fully ingrained.
I would say what I'm finding to be most interesting. So we perform skill assessments for the majority of our students. So we've got a sampling of 5,000 plus skill assessment results now across 37 plus technical domains. The skill abilities of our industry, I find that surprising. I find it surprising how many 10, 20-year folks will state that they don't need training, and then you put them through a skill assessment, and when you get the quantitative results, they do not understand things like PID loops. They don't understand things like backnet fundamentals. They don't understand basic networking. These are the people who are mentoring and leading and developing. This actually piggybacks into the original question, which how do we compare to trade schools and OJT? I view us as replacing them. And the reason why is our strategic initiatives and our platform goals for our programs are a fully trained, deployable, profitable technician within 6 months. You roll them through the training, they come out within 6 months, they're going to be hireable, they're going to go on your job, they're going to execute the basic tasks that we all do within our first couple of years. And what I see is that we heavily weigh an OJT model as the preferred model for development. So you take someone through a trade school, and then the expectation is 3 years of OJT. When the staff who are performing that OJT are performing poorly on assessments, and they're mentoring people while also trying to run a book of business, you get what we're currently getting as far as technical talent. And those are things that are surprising, but yet not surprising at the same time.
So this is Mark. So question for both of you. So are you seeing folks who have never been involved in the industry contact you and starting to raise their hand and say, hey, I'm kind of interested in this industry. I've got to get spun up on this. I got to get trained in whatever. Or the majority of the folks that you guys have come in contact with are folks already within the industry looking to broaden their capabilities and their expertise?
I think you're gonna get two different answers because James is much more geared towards people in the industry, but I'm not going to speak for him. For us, I would say originally we were getting people in the industry. Since we've shifted our marketing, both from our podcast and our blog posts and just our SEO content, we are now starting to draw people who are in parallel trades. So you could argue are in the industry, as well as people who are in non-parallel trades like IT. Electrician is hit or miss. You could say they're in our industry, but some of them are residential. Like we had someone pay out of pocket to go through our technician path, plus buy our lab kit. And he's moved through it and he has standing interviews with Train and one other of our contractors, customers in the West Coast where they're not really hiring people right now. But it's very interesting how people are willing to pick up talent even if they don't have a place to put them, which gives me hope for the future of our industry.
So Phil, you said a couple things. One is that
Wait a minute, I want to get James.
You see yourself as potentially, well, essentially competing with the traditional trade schools, but and because you feel you have a better product. But then the second thing you said is that you're looking to attract a more immature student, or a less experienced student. Maybe somebody's fresh out or looking at the industry for the first time, or going from a different industry into this industry. Have you thought about adding into that some sort of an apprentice component to companies that are starting to get familiar with you, to where they can get some on-the-job training in addition to the training, the formal training they get through your program?
So I wrote down your question. I think Mark wanted to get feedback from James before we jumped onto that question. So okay. I can answer it either way. Mark, do you want to get James' feedback first?
It's up to you guys, however you want to do it, but I definitely want to hear from James though.
Yeah, because I wrote down your question. I won't forget it.
Okay.
All right, I'll go real quick. So Mark's original question was, is anyone taking my course that's brand new to the industry? And the answer so far is not yet. Although there's been a couple of people that are, say, looking to invest in startups, and they're trying to move from an adjacent space into this one. So they're not maybe here to stay. They're not maybe one of us, but yeah, there's some people that are looking at just trying to get a grasp on how this industry works. I think they're looking at my course. The other thought that I had when I was thinking about answering this was, we have I think the people on this call are inside of an industry that's inside of a larger industry. So well, we talk about BMS, BAS, even some analytics type of folks are in here. There's been people that are taking my course that are sort of outside of that even. So I've had audio visual students like Vanti out of the UK. They're a master systems integrator. They sent 2 students in, and these people were, they came from the audio visual world, and they're trying to understand sort of the rest of the landscape. So there's been quite a few people from maybe outside BMS that are looking at my course to understand things a little bit more holistically.
Thanks.
So, Phil.
Yeah, so to answer your question around the whole apprenticeship model, yeah, I absolutely agree with the apprenticeship model. What I hope people don't hear from me is that I find OJT useless. I don't find it useless. I find untrained people being placed into OJT useless, because let's be real, they're going to carry around tool bags. They're going to cause more slippage than they do profitability. So taking someone and training them beforehand is extremely valuable. Now, how do you take someone who has zero knowledge and get them to the point where they can do OJT and they can do it effectively? Yes, an apprenticeship model does work well with that. I still believe firmly, based on experience from the data we have, the feedback from the employers who use our services, that you need to put the training before you do the apprenticeship, even with inexperienced people. And the reason why is I'll use company A and company B because I won't use their names on here, but we have company A who every new hire goes through a technician path before they get put out in the field. Company B we'll actually let them be in the field for about 6 months, and then we'll put them into training. Company B is now switching to the same model as Company A because they're seeing the slippage that is occurring. And if we're real with one another, the first 2 weeks are all HR tasks. You're sitting there watching videos, filling out forms. So to have them cram through training, and then here's the beauty of it, it being online, they can pop open their phone while they're out on the job site and pull the how to commission a controller checklist out and watch the video while they're doing it. They can interact with the discussion forums. They can hop into the live office hours. And I think that coupled with training, and I know James hit on the Zoom meetings, the message boards, a lot of those kind of Web 2.0 technologies are really helping us to bring near real-time response in the moment when someone's trying to figure something out. And I think that's the big difference.
So I want to go to one of the questions posed by Eric, and it's kind of a fundamental question that I know that we at Monday Life have brought up on and off over the past few months. And it's kind of where is a good starting point to be trained? Is it somebody that knows the mechanical side of things or somebody that knows the IT side of things?
Yeah,
I
great
don't know.
question, Anto.
Yeah.
So if James, if you don't mind, I'll take that because I deal with people more kind of earlier than you probably run into them. So TD Industries, who's a customer of ours, for their service as well as their controls teams that they train, their hiring manager, Randy Heydrich, he prefers to find people with IT backgrounds and teach them mechanical. Then we run into other folks, obviously. Train likes people with a mechanical background. Sunbelt, Alberio, MCOR, they tend to like mechanical backgrounds. I tend to see that if you have mechanical services attached to your business, you usually like mechanical backgrounds just because of the culture. If you are a purely system integrator, controls contractor, you tend to like the electrical IT backgrounds. So it's really what is the culture of the business. I don't think either or necessarily matters until you get out of commercial real estate and you get into like healthcare. You get into the kind of topics that James teaches in his course, where complex system integration. That's when having someone with a systems mindset and IT mindset is going to be beneficial over a mechanical background, especially since we're converting to a lot of smart equipment where the equipment has the controls embedded in them. So going and attaching valves and actuators and things are not necessarily in the controls tech's purview as much anymore. Not to say it doesn't occur, but it's occurring less.
Guys, one of the things we're quite interested and talked about a number of times is how do you attract new people into the industry, because there is a shortage of skilled labor, but kind of a lot of what you've both been saying is it's about training the labor that's already in the marketplace, and yet the market is beginning to stretch out a lot more than that, right from edge to cloud services, and those services could be anything from facility management and beyond, and space management and stuff, all new stuff that's coming into the industry. Have you got any kind of thoughts on what may attract new people to the industry?
James, you want to take a first stab at this?
Yeah, I mean, so I devote kind of most of the first week of the course around kind of the bigger picture things that are happening in the sort of the broader buildings industry, outside of even broader than, say, controls or energy or any one thing. And I think they're kind of happening as we speak, right? So obviously climate change is a big deal. Obviously COVID is a big deal. Obviously these huge commitments that all the corporations are making towards greenhouse gas reductions, those types of things. So I think there's changes afoot that are going to end up funneling people, and already are funneling people into our industry. So I think as we sort of tell our stories around the successful building implementations, that's what I like to do, is I like to say, okay, these changes are happening and we're able to make this happen in this building and that building. And here's this portfolio who are really far down the road. So we're kind of connecting, these huge global problems with the ones that are out there doing it. I think that's a story that we have to continue to keep telling. And I tell it on my podcast and try to tell it on my newsletter, but then really taking those lessons and taking those into the course is I think just we can do this, right? And getting that message driven into people is going to start to attract people that are going to want to solve those big problems.
Yeah. So I'd say if you ask me in 6 months, I'll have some more quantifiable data because we'll start running ads after we get the first couple people through cohort 1 and 2 of this student focused program. And then once we start running the ads and we start seeing who responds, then we'll be able to do better targeting. So I'll be able to tell you with data who is drawing in. But to James's point, I wrote down while he was talking who, where, why, vision, and story. So we've got to figure out the who, the where. And then as far as the why, James articulated a good why. Also, I think, money moves things, and the fact that people can make six-figure salaries within a relatively short amount of time in this industry is something I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about. The fact that you can have a career. Also, so I was working with Carrier on this. It never went anywhere. Probably, I think it's more so due to COVID hitting. But I was working with their diversity council on disenfranchised communities. And how do we go and train disenfranchised communities? How do we get into communities where if you're able to offer them a $60,000, $70,000 career, you essentially change their cultural trajectory, because now you take them into an area where they have income potential that moves them out of kind of whatever path they were on in the current lifestyle they were living. So that was something that was very interesting to me, that I was passionate about, because I mean, as a business owner, I think one of the best ways to help people is to give them a vision and an opportunity to improve themselves. So that's something I want us to focus on. That is a very underserved community from a STEM perspective. And I'm not just talking by race, but I'm also talking by just culturally. There's across all racial spectrums, there are low income communities that can be benefited. And so I think that is an area that if we figure out how to tap, would be very beneficial.
So an interesting question Chad just put up, which I think is an impossible one to answer, but I'm going to ask you anyway, which is how long does it take for a person to, he says, to get certified, which I know that's an awkward word, but what's, and I don't know, obviously the starting point will change that and the expectations, but.
So we've got a current guy who was an electrician. He was a low voltage electrician who was just doing like residential work. So you got kind of some experience going through our paths. I mean, he's employable right now. He's been going through training for 2 months while working a full-time job. I would estimate about 6 months properly deployed training. The big challenge is going to be the admission screening. If we get the admission screening right and the pre-skill assessments correct, because we're going to do basic cognitive assessments as part of admission. We're going to make sure people are mechanically inclined, make sure they have more of a systems mindset. If you get that right and dialed in, that is the biggest determining factor, besides for work ethic, on people being able to execute. Get those two things right, then it's just a matter of them having the work ethic to work through the programs. The programs work.
James, do you have a view on timeline and from what you've seen?
I think that's a great answer. Not really, because my mind's just going, it depends. The engineer's answer. The engineer's always using the it depends answer.
Do you know if you have an apprenticeship, and so it takes you 3 years perhaps? And
Yeah.
then you're still a beginner.
You got to ask yourself. So this is the thing that frustrates me, and I know frustrate's a strong word, but I see folks who are like 3, 5 years, 7 years. And I say to myself, we've got to look at the Pareto principle. So the Pareto principle, what does or what do we do most of the time that takes up most of our jobs? So that kind of, what is the 20% that we do 80% of the time? And that's going and downloading controller programs to VAV boxes, checking out point-to-point, going and adding graphics, doing bulk uploads, making sure the server's running. And if we train to those specific tasks, okay, they run into a heat pump chiller and they got to spend 16 hours trying to figure out what the heck it is. But how often do they run into a heat pump chiller? How often do they go run into some crazy complex air handler enthalpy with all sorts of DOAS systems attached to it? Craziness. The likelihood is they run into a rooftop unit and some VAV boxes and some exhaust fans. That's the majority of the installed assets in our industry. If we train to that, we can get them effective on most work. And it's kind of like that with computer programming. It's like that with engineering. It's like that with almost any skill out there. You train people to the commonalities, and then they develop these specialties as they're in the workforce.
I think it's well said. Yeah, I think it's what do we want them to do? I think within 6 months, you can train people to be effective at a certain part of the job, not every facet of the job, but a certain part of the job, I think, without question. Hey, Anto, you interested in going around the theme of Eric's other question there? Because I wanted to comment.
Yeah, go ahead. I was just looking at it.
Yeah, well, part of the reason I want to comment on it is Mark and I ended up having a conversation kind of around that. And it came out of, work we did last week in prep for this whole theme, right? We reached out to people at colleges, and lots of people contributed lists of all of these organizations where there's different training in addition to what James and Phil are doing. And I'll say for myself, it was kind of a revelation. Mark and I seemed to share it was, wait a minute, time out. There are plenty of resources to get this training in all of these different facets. The problem is the one that Eric has brought up. How do we make this more attractive? I mean, I say that since I started, this has never been a boring career because it changes rapidly, new technology, new opportunities, and all of that type of stuff. But what's the problem? And one of the things I'm going to suggest, I'm really glad James and Phil here, is part of the problem is how we open this session. A lot of us here are old guys talking about this, but not because we don't want young people. We just can't figure out why don't they want to come in? There's cool stuff here, good salaries, challenging work, technology. How do we get them interested enough to invest 6 months? I don't have an answer, by the way.
So if you recall, John, the topic of next week's show under this whole umbrella of workforce, future workforce, is making smart buildings sexy, or words to that effect, right? So that goes to that. So hopefully we can. I don't know how we do that. That's a different problem.
Chad, I think he came up with the solution. We just need to get a Hollywood studio to do
Right.
about the MacGyver of controls, right?
Okay.
Jill, I wanted to follow up on one thing. You mentioned that you do upfront assessments on the individual's, systems capabilities, or you actually try to test what their intelligence and their aptitude is, and that, in your mind, is necessary if at the end of 6 months they're going to be effective. Did I get that right?
Yeah, so that's something that's still in process. So we have a technical skill assessment that's used by contractors, but that's a very quantitative, focused on skill specific questions. What we're developing as far as an admissions process is there's already tools out there that do basic mechanical aptitude, basic technical aptitude. Those are the aptitudes we're looking at. And then as we get feedback from the people who hire the initial batch of our students, we'll start to see, are our assumptions correct around the aptitudes? Because I can look at myself having managed large teams in the past, and the ones that did well and the ones that did not do well, regardless of work ethic, had specific aptitudes.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're looking for, because you can have all the work ethic in the world, but if you can't visualize systems and you can't conceptualize broad sets of data, then you're not going to do well in this space.
So
Yeah.
here's a question. So Phil, from your perspective, you kind of get into the technical side. In other words, a technician part of their role within our industry. Our industry, I think this whole group, attendees and panelists, hopefully will agree that we've expanded. It's not just technicians. There's lots of other opportunities that are out there that have presented themselves within the built environment, whether it be understanding data and analytics, facility maintenance and management that's non-technical, guys, non-technical. How do we get folks to those parts of the opportunities that exist that's not hardcore technical and or development?
Yeah, it's a good point. There's a lot of entry-level white-collar positions in this industry. They're, you got to get started and build your career, but it isn't just about the blue collar or the technician side, right? Yeah.
And
James,
I think
you wanna go first? I don't want to be the only one.
Go ahead. You go ahead, Phil.
Okay, all right. So there's a reason we rebranded to Smart Buildings Academy. Our vision is by 2025 to provide training for all the different technical stacks that make up a smart building. And also, as associated with that, there will be operational skills. We repeatedly get requests from operational managers for manager training, people training, skills training, sales training. And we're working on partnerships with sales training companies, operational training companies, behavioral training companies to provide unified training for the built environment.
Yeah, the approach that I've taken and kind of our community has kind of shifted towards is that I think that each organization that owns buildings needs some sort of smart building champion, some sort of like internal to the organization that says, I'm going to take this on. And I use the word shepherd a lot. I feel like they need to be able to shepherd the organization through the journey that goes from dumb buildings to smart buildings. And that's kind of what I've been sort of focused on. And honestly, I'm trying to get the word out more to those people. Cause like when we talk about our community here and even within the Nexus community, it's still a bunch of people that are already drinking the Kool-Aid, a bunch of people that are already smart buildings nerds. And so that question mark is what I'm trying to figure out, as well as how to sort of attract those people that are not already nerds and turn them into nerds. There you go.
Yeah, and I just at the outset, the beginning of this, we shared the statistic as far as the lost jobs. And just those three industries, there's 1.2 million people. How do we get 0.25% of that group interested in our industry, whether it's tech side, ops side, sales side, marketing side, who cares?
I'll tell you what, Mark, I bet you're probably doing something like this already, but this military to building, that there's got to be a conduit there too from the veteran community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm trying to crack that because Home Depot has the best model, in my opinion, for military to controls. We've got some stuff with the U.S. Army and U.S. Air Force, but those are base specific.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how do you move an organization like that.
Yeah, if I have a moment here, I wouldn't mind mentioning a whole other piece that's missing here, and that's the women of our industry. We have them all involved in the secretarial pushing and the social media side. Most of them are kind of not very visible, and now we're starting to get a fair amount of programmers that are starting to come in. I think opening up and celebrating those people is important to our industry. Last year we did our March issue. We basically dedicated it to the women, and it was a great success. And I too was surprised at how many champions we have in the industry. We need to identify them, and we're doing that again this March. I sent out a feeler, and they all came back all keen to tell us. But I think that's another thing. If you want to make it sexy, have the folks that have the ability to do that. And I think also just to understand where our industry is going. Our industry is becoming very touchy-feely, the whole health side of it. That's the biggest piece of our industry is doing the interface between the technology and the people in the buildings. And I kind of believe that women are probably better at that than we are. And we need to unlock that workforce. Working with Scott Cochran is refreshing. He has all these young ladies that are in high positions, and they basically make things happen. It's just a real refreshing organization to work with. I think we need to follow that lead and celebrate these people. These people. I didn't say that.
Yes, you did, Ken.
Strike that from the record.
So a lot of the discussion has been, when we talk about our industry, has been in training the channel, in training people that are in the business of installing controls, master system integrators, etc. But to me, the biggest lack in the industry is training on the customer side. The owners basically don't understand the technology, don't understand how it's applied. Other than some kind of intercourse they have with sales men from our industry, they have very little knowledge. So I'm wondering, the guys, the question is, what are we doing to get building owners involved and get them educated so people actually understand what it is that we're selling and why they might want to buy it?
Okay, great question.
Yeah, it is. I think that's one of my main questions. So in the first cohort that I taught in the fall, there were 3 people out of the 25 that were representing building owners in some way. There was a facility manager from a university in the Southeast. There was a gentleman from Oxford Properties. They have their own smart buildings group. And there was someone from CBRE that is probably a stretch on calling them a building owner. But my goal is to get that to at least 50% for each cohort moving forward. And that's one of the things that I'm doing right now, is taking a course of my own on marketing and getting the word out. Because like I said, when I write an email out to Nexus subscribers, they're most of, like you guys, they're not building owners for the most part. And so I need to sort of figure out how to get in front of them. And that's one of my main focuses, because I totally agree with you. I think, when I've been the one selling smart building projects, smart building solutions, it's always been difficult because the person on the other side of the table hasn't quite gotten it. So that's one of my main goals.
Great.
So we took a slightly different approach. What we did, we developed a BAS for operators course. I looked at what is one of the most painful touch points for contractors and owners, and it's during the warranty phase. It's when, the owner, if they're doing things right, are trying to get free service, and the contractors, if they're doing things right, are trying to get off the job. And I said, what if we could provide training that would make the owner a better user of their system? So we created a BAS for operators course, and contractors actually attach that to their quote to replace their mandated specified training requirement. And they use that course in lieu of that. And by doing that, that gets us into the owners without having to go and sell to owners. And so that's opened up, I think we got Amazon out of that. We got the GSA out of that. We got a couple property developers out of that so far. And that's just been going on for a couple months now. So that is we piggybacked on an existing requirement to bring our solution into the owner environment.
Great.
Yeah, that article that I mentioned, Jim echoed that whole aspect of it too, by the hydrogen struggles research, that the gap in the understanding of the end user in the technology and the capabilities is the one glaring part that they recognize.
Great.
So we're at the top of the hour. Maybe I can just give both James and Phil a brief chance to wrap this up and make some comments as to how we can help create a great workforce for smart buildings.
Go first. I'll just say thanks for having me. It's great to see all your faces today, all the passion. I also wanted to say I think there's one thing that we can all do, which is to make buildings smarter. It sounds pretty trite, but when we can make a building smarter, we can inspire those people that are coming into the industry. And I think, speaking as one of those people that came in, I think we also need to make sure that they're not going back out once they come in, because I think when you hit these obstacles that we're all trying to get around on a day-to-day basis on every project, you can get kind of sick of it. And I think that's another thing. If we're trying to get people in, we got to try to make sure they're not going back out again. Thanks, Phil.
So if I think of the single greatest inflection point, where can we make the most impact with the least amount of effort? It would be very interesting if we could get involved with leading K through 12 education boards and member bodies and make them aware of the skilled trades community. I feel like the higher ed market has had a monopoly on voices to those people, and they haven't had, outside of unions, a good representation from the skilled trades. And so if we were able to make that something that I got to imagine that for career counselors, there's a national group of some sort. And if we could just get on their mailing list and provide a nice resource that explained this career path and what it looked like, I feel like that would be something that they could add to their catalog. And they could say, hey, if you have a student who maybe tests low, but they test high in math, but they test low in maybe like language arts and things like that, and they're interested in, you know, woodworking and the mechanical shops and stuff like that, then this is a path. So we could give them an ideal student profile and align that student profile with a career path. I think that would be very impactful.
Great. That's great note to wrap this up. I've just seen the news that there is going to be a new Hollywood series going to be created for this space. It's called Smart Buildings, and it will feature Mark, the HVAC guy, John, the analytics guy, Bill, the network guy, and Jim, the backnet guy. So with that, let's bring this to a close. We'll have a video of this up on YouTube by morning, and we'll be back next week. Thank you for joining us, James and Phil, our guests, and have a great week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks everyone.
Bye-bye.
Hi, guys.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.